Welcome to the Backstage Stories of Women on Stage, a podcast by Women on Stage recorded live. Let's go backstage and amplify the voices of leading women in tech from all across the globe. Get inspired and learn something new. Because if you can see it, you can be it. Join us. Visit womenonstage.net.
So, hi everybody, and welcome to the Backstage Stories of Women on Stage podcast, where we amplify the voices of leading women in tech from all across the world. I'm Moran, the CEO and founder of Women on Stage, and today we'll be hosting Jossie Haines, an executive and leadership coach and former VP of software engineering and head of DE&I, to discuss how to thrive as a senior women leader in tech. With 25 years of experience in software engineering leadership, Jossie is a passionate advocate for women in technology, just like us, and she's dedicated to changing the alarming statistics of over 50% of women live in the tech industry by the age of 35. So, hi, Jossie, and welcome to the Backstage. I'm so happy you could join us.
Hi, so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited. This is finally happening. We've been discussing this episode for quite some time now, and let's just start. Okay, so 25 years of experience. That's really a lot to cover. We don't have all day, but and maybe not tomorrow as well. But let us just hear a little bit more about you. Could you share a little bit more about your background? How did you get here?
Yeah, so I'll give the highlights. So I went to college actually my undergrad degree is in chemistry and material science because my parents wanted me to be a doctor. And I realized my junior year, I had very little interest in going to med school. And so I got a job as a technical consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers. And they sent us to a coding boot camp. I learned how to code. I picked it up really quickly. I fell in love. And so they actually sent me here to the Bay Area. And this was 1999, the middle of the dot-com boom. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is where I want to be. Like, the weather was great. Like, everyone cared about building technology. You know, it was like the naive time in the tech industry where everyone thought technology was going to make the world a better place in all ways. And I was like, this is where I want to be. And they didn't want to
still do, don't they?
Some still do, but and hey, I want tech to make the world a better place, but I think we also have to look at the realistic angle that it's not always making the world a better place. And so they didn't want to move me out here. So I got a job at a little .com startup as a web developer. And so in February of 2000, I moved out here knowing literally like two other people in all of California. And that started my tech career. So I worked as a software engineer at a number of different companies. I went and got my master's degree in computer science at UC Santa Cruz. In 2010, I joined Zynga, which is for those who don't know, it is a gaming company. And back in the day, it was known for all the big Facebook games. So the Farmville, Chefville. I joined when we were 1,000 people. We went from 1,000 to 2,000 people my first year. I actually went from software engineer to director of engineering in 3 years while I was there. So that's a whole story in and of itself. Then, unfortunately, my mom passed away. I moved to Florida for 9 months to take care of my dad. Things got better with him. I realized I did not want to live in Florida. Came back to the Bay Area, ended up at Zynga again for another year where I was director of engineering for their ads platform, which was like 25% of Zynga's revenue went through our tech. We had like a few billion API calls a day. Then I went to Apple. I worked on my teams, did the Siri integrations for Siri Music, Media, and Sports. So we did Siri Music for the HomePod. So we added like 30 new features for that. My other team did Siri on Apple TV, and we won a technical Emmy for that integration while I was leading the team.
Wow.
I also started Women in Siri while I was there, which actually after I left turned into one of the largest sub ERGs at Apple. It's now Women in AI and ML. And
how cool!
But I got really burnt out when I was at Apple, and I went through a lot of imposter syndrome, and I actually went through a lot of the challenges that women in the tech industry face. And so when I left Apple in January of 2018, I thought I was going to leave tech. I thought I was done. I am done with being treated poorly. I also thought I was an awful manager, despite the fact that people were telling me that I was the best manager they'd ever had. I left Apple with such imposter syndrome that like I failed. I was like, I suck at management. I can't do this. And I gave myself the first break I'd ever given myself really in my career. I took 6 months off. I said, I need to figure out what I'm doing. And I learned about self-care. I learned about journaling and personal development. And I gave myself time, and I realized a few things. One is I love technology. I've been playing with computers since I was 5 years old, and I had a Commodore 64. So I was like, I'm not leaving this industry just because somebody else is basically making me feel like I don't belong. And so I said, I'm going to come back to tech under my roles this time. And so when they asked me to join Tile as their platform engineering director, I actually spoke to the CEO. And I said to him, look, I love what you're doing. I'd love to be the platform engineering director. But I want to work somewhere where inclusion isn't just lip service. I want to start the mentoring program that I had wanted to start at Apple, but the VP at the time said he didn't believe in mentoring, so I wasn't allowed to start. And I also want to help lead your DEI efforts, right? I said, like, this is something I'm passionate about, and I don't want this to feel like I have to do this like on the side, right? Like, I want to be able to do this. And he surprised me. And he actually said, Jossie, I promised my wife and daughters I was going to make Tile one of the best places for women to work in the Valley. So I joined and we delivered on that promise. And, I don't want it to sound like it was just like the two of us. Like, this was a huge team effort. Our head of people really participated. Like, the entire exec staff was really behind this. And that's really what you need to create an inclusive culture. We had a DEI council of at its peak around 20 people who'd help and participate in different things. And our company wasn't that big. We had 150 people. So, it was something that we cared about. And so during my time at Tile, COVID hit, and then we were actually scaling the engineering organization at the time, and I saw an opportunity. I was like, I really wanted to become an executive, and so I said, look, right now we need to double our engineering team. We need to restructure how things are doing. I'd known our VP at the time, a VP of engineering at the time, for many years. I'd worked with him actually at Zynga and at NetApp over my career. And we worked really well together. And he is much stronger just on pure technical, and I am much stronger at the leadership side. Not that we're not good at the other thing, but if you want to talk about what is somebody's superpower, it is that. And the reason we work well together is we have complementary strengths. So I said, look, promote him to CTO. He can really focus on these big architecture shifts that we're needing to do. Promote me to VP of engineering, and I will help scale the organization. So we did that. We ended up doubling the team size in 4.5 months. We completely restructured how we were doing our entire product engineering and kept our inclusive culture in the middle of COVID. And I realized I'd kind of done it. And I said, I don't want to be doing this just one company at a time. And so in July of 2022, I left Tile and started my own business. And so now I focus on coaching women leaders in the tech industry to thrive and architect careers they love. And I also do fractional engineering and product leadership as well. It's just to keep the engineering side of my brain going too. So.
I love that. I really love that. And I love how you say architecture career and the way that it all like boils down to your journey and the fact that you've put everything like it is now your time to give back and do it at scale. I really really love that. And I'm curious though, like, you know, women's representation in senior leadership is really low.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to senior engineering leadership, like VP of engineering, for instance, it's almost non-existent. And like doing that transition, and like I don't want to say giving that up, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's the right way to call it, but let's say giving that up just for the sake
Mm-hmm.
just for the sake of the discussion, putting that aside and deciding to start your own business and to become an executive coach full time is not a very traditional thing to do. So could you, like, what would you say to someone who's contemplating the same transition? And is it something that you would advise other women who might feel a little, tired from the corporate world, and feel they're like being tired, that they feel that the culture is not inclusive enough and they just want to do stuff on their own? What would you tell them?
Yeah, so, because I reflect a lot about like when I left Apple, and I really was like, no, like I'm not done here. And, as I mentioned, one of the things I've actually picked up like this year is I do have like a fractional leadership role. I'm actually helping a small startup build a new product that we're hopefully launching later this year, and I'm running engineering and product and program management for it. Like, it's a tiny team. There's like 5 of us. So let's be clear, it's not
that's
a big
tiny
team,
for you,
but
it's like you do it in the middle of the night. They wake you up. Yeah, I can manage 5 people. That's
oh no,
nothing.
I'm very good at setting my boundaries. I've told them like 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Like that is when you get to talk to me. And so for me, what it really came to was when I left Apple, I felt like I was running away from something, right? I felt like I was leaving something because of how I was being treated. When I started this, it really was, I am going towards something. Mm-hmm. This is my passion. Like, this is what I want to be doing.
I want to pursue it. Got it.
Yeah, and it's something I'm pursuing. And so when I talk to women, and because I personally do believe, like in my current role, I can actually keep more women and get more women to that executive level. And yeah, the numbers are abysmal. We only have 9% of engineering executives are women. So like, let's try to change
I know even
that
less than 4%, but I guess it depends where you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so it's really, so for me, I'm like, my whole passion is like, let us get more women there. And by doing this, I can do that. And I realize like, I love coaching. I tell people, you know what, my teams like have built products that have been used by billions of people. Like over all the products that I've built, like they've been used by billions of people. And yet what I do on a day-to-day basis in the last 2 years with coaching has been just so much more emotionally rewarding, because every single person I talk to, it's like the ripple effect and the impact that I don't just have on them, but on their employees, right? Like on their families. A recent coaching client of mine said, my husband is so happy I'm doing this because I seem so much more confident and relaxed. Right? Like, I've had a client say, I now have the best relationship I do with my parents because of some of the communication work that we have done, and like letting go of like your saboteurs and fears. And so obviously like that's not the focus, but it's the overall impact, because I really do believe in like, let's coach the whole human. Like the focus is on the leadership side, but it's like, really, it's about how do you architect a career in life that you love? Like, I want people to be happy and thriving. And so if you really want to stay in tech, but you're just in a company that doesn't support you, find somewhere else that does. Because there are companies out there, right? And I'm not saying it is perfect, right? Nowhere is perfect, but there are definitely companies that are better than others. And you can find those situations. Also find community. Like, this is why I think, women end up networking so much less than men. A lot of times it's because, we end up being busier, and yet we feel so isolated. And so these are like the little things that can like help you stay in the industry. And also, as you're going up the career ladder, there's going to be less and less and less women in the room, especially in tech. And so it's really about then finding your support system, finding other people who can help you realize like, no, yeah, it's like, you're not crazy that you're feeling this way from this conversation, right? Like, it's okay. Other people have felt that too. And just having that support, whether it's you find a sponsor, right? Whether it's you find a mentor, whether you find a coach, right? Whether you find a community, like find people, find somebody who can really support you in your journey. I tell people, transition to whatever it is that you're super passionate about. And also realize your career is not linear, right? Like, may I someday go back to like a VP role somewhere? Maybe I'll start my own tech company. I have no idea right now. Like, but I'm not going to like limit myself. I just know like right now in my career, I love what I am doing. I love being able to balance and coach women, and then also like use that engineering side of my brain and the fractional role and feel like I'm building something. Because I really like, I geek out on like looking at the big picture, figuring out how everything needs to work, and then diving into the details. Like, I can do both really, really well. And like, that's kind of my superpower. And that's great when you're like starting to build something from scratch. And I have none of the bureaucracy. Like, that's the other thing that's nice too. When you're a tiny little startup, like, it's me, my devs used to work for me. Like, I mean, we just, I used to work with the business guy at Tile. Like, it's really nice. And so for me, I'm like, I'm really enjoying and loving what I do. So that's what I tell women. It's like, so often we're kind of pigeonholed into like, oh, you should be giving back in a certain way, right? You should be volunteering your free time. And hey, if you want to volunteer, like I volunteer all the time. I'm not saying don't do that, but also, I also don't want women to feel like, oh my gosh, like I have to stay in a tech company if that's not what they truly want to be doing. But if it is what they want to be doing, but they just don't feel like they're in the right place, then go find the right place to do it.
I actually have a question about that. I think like you asking yourself if this is the right place. I think that in many cases, and especially if you go through several companies, there are some cases where women work at the same company for like 20 years. They stay at the same place because it's comfortable and it's convenient and they don't want to switch places. That's one case. But even if they do like sweet jobs, and every time there's
Mm-hmm.
something that's happening, and people tell them they're not good enough, or they feel they're not treated well enough, and people ask them weird questions, whatever. There are a lot of stories out there, but they kind of feel along the way that maybe I wasn't born for this role, maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
not for me, maybe this world is not for me. It's because they don't even know there's a possibility for another company out there that will be good for them. So they just say, okay, the tech world is not for me. So how do
Mm-hmm.
you know if it's for you, or is and you should just change the environment, or you just need to change the environment you're in? Like how can you tell?
So I think that's where networking can be really helpful
Hmm.
because again, when you're the only one in the room and you're having this conversation in your head, it's actually really hard to figure out, is it me or is it the environment?
Hmm.
But if you go talk to other women and they can say like, yeah, no, I'm not saying things are perfect at my company, but I am feeling supported here and this is what it looks like. Just being able to see the possibility can really help you shift your mindset.
I totally agree. It's like they say one of the advantages of group therapy is the way that people share their problems,
Mm-hmm.
and then you feel like you're not alone. Then you feel like, oh, they have it worse, or oh, my case is better. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
and then feel people feel differently about their own problems. So I think like having that network, that community, and especially a community of other women
Yeah.
in leadership roles is really 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 important. Is there any like special communities that you recommend joining, or in your
Yeah,
area?
so one of my favorite communities for women engineering leaders is SheTO. They're a
Okay.
nonprofit. They're actually the largest engineering leadership community for women. I think there's over 3,500 of us now in the
Cool.
community. They're doing a summit in here in the Bay Area in September, I believe. And it's
That's cool.
awesome, like having 200. Last year there was like I think 200 of us at the summit, and it's like, where else do you get 200 women engineering leaders in a room together? But then there's more communities too. Like I always recommend Alpha is a great virtual online community for women in tech, and it's not just for leaders. There's lots of communities out there. Unfortunately, Women Who Code closed earlier this year, which was very sad.
Hmm.
But there's still a lot of groups out there, and also look at local meetups as well, right? I think find meetups where in your community, and see who else lives around you. If you live in a major hub, like that can be a great place to meet others, and attend conferences, right? Like I always tell women, like
Hmm.
go to conferences, right? Even if it's not just a
Speak
women
at
in tech.
conferences.
Yeah, speak at conferences, right? And I mean, there are, women's conferences like Women Impact Tech, for example, right? But I always recommend like go to your, lead dev, for example, does a really amazing engineering leadership conference. And yes, the majority are men, but they are actually really supportive of women. And there's always a number of women there. I always have a great time networking with some of the other women at lead dev conferences. So, just go out there and meet people. And guess what? Here's my networking tip at a conference. Like, especially if you're an introvert like me, people don't think I'm an introvert, but if you'd known me when I was a child, like I didn't speak to anybody. I had no friends. It was people were like, "You're an introvert." I'm like, "Yes, I actually am."
I also
Um,
get that all the time as well.
Like, I actually am. It's realize that everybody in that room is pretty much in the same situation you are. Like, most of these people, like, yeah, maybe they're there with a few colleagues or whatever, but most of these people don't know anybody else in this room. And they also just want to meet some folks. So go up to somebody and, hey, especially if you're at a tech conference, like, you can talk about what was the most interesting panel that you recently attended. Like, you can talk about what you do. There's like definitely going to be shared commonality there. So just be curious, ask, have a few questions in your back pocket, and don't be afraid to go up to somebody you don't know and just say hi. Nobody's gonna like bite your head off. And if somebody were to be rude to you, just be like, okay, it's about them, not about me, and find somebody else. So
I don't think people are actually rude at
no,
these circumstances. Like,
no.
worst case, you can just find someone else. And
Yeah.
one of the most important indicators, and that's also really a great icebreaker to discuss whether there's a line in the ladies' room or not.
Yeah.
If you have a long line at the ladies' room at a tech conference, at an engineering conference, that's a very, very, very good sign, and that's something definitely worth speaking about. And then you can.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, yes. That is great. Absolutely. And here's a piece of advice that I got from a public speaking coach once, which like
Okay.
it was like the best advice I ever got, and it relates to networking, which is if you walk into a room of 100 people, are you going to resonate with every single one of them? Most likely not, right? And so, like, if one conversation falls flat, like, that's okay. Like, just go have another conversation. And the way this applied to public speaking was, he said, it's the same thing when you're giving a talk, right? If you're giving a talk and you get some people in the audience who don't end up resonating with what you're saying, but you end up having other people who love what you say, like, that's a win. That actually means like you attracted your audience, and like it's about, appealing to those folks. You're not going to appeal to everybody, right? And so it's the same thing with networking as well. Don't worry about having every single conversation be, it's not about finding your best friend in every single conversation you have.
Totally, totally. When it comes to public speaking, I would say like aim for the majority, aim for
Yeah.
80% of the people, and don't be obsessed about the one who told you that's who did a crooked face or something.
Yeah.
Don't be obsessed with them.
Or when you get
Um,
you the feedback afterwards, right? Like, because I know
yeah.
that would, like, it's really hard. You get feedback and you get like 20 things that are praising you, and then you get a couple that are not, and you obsess about the two
Hmm.
people who said that they didn't like what you had to say. And you're like, wait, why am I doing this?
Classic, really, really classic. Okay, so I this conversation is so interesting. I had so many other questions to ask you, but it's so interesting that I'll ask one last question before
Okay.
we finish. Okay, I want to hear from your. It can be from your personal stories, like from your personal journey, or from the women you meet. They say that. Women in tech, women are more likely to leave before the age of 35, and
Hmm.
some of them will leave tech altogether. Um, so, could you share a few examples of stories of that you've seen happening to women in engineering, and when exactly in the funnel does it happen? Does it happen on their first job, a little later than that? What happens there? Could you share a little stories and some data about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, it can start at the very beginning of the funnel. I forget which organization it was, but one of the women organizations looked at women who were going into their first internships, and they were applying for internships roles. And I think it was somewhere between, I think it was like 30% of the women had some sort of biased thing happen during their internship interview process.
Mm-hmm.
So it does start from the very beginning, unfortunately. And it does kind of keep happening at different points, right? There is this concept called the broken rung, which is that for the last numbers I looked, because I looked at the 2023 McKinsey report for this, was that for every 100 men that are promoted to management, only 87 women are. And so women kind of run into challenges there, kind of in getting into leadership roles. And then ironically, especially for women in like engineering, one of the things that happens is we end up being considered non-technical, right? So often I hear women say, I'm being encouraged to go become a product manager or, go into program management because I'm so good at organizing things that I'm being encouraged to do that instead of stay in the technical track. And if you think the number of women executives in engineering is abysmal, the number of women who are like at that principal scientist, like high level role, like whatever it's called at an organization, distinguished engineer, whatever, like that is even worse.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the coaching engagements I've been doing with Adobe, in fact, is actually helping them get more women to stay in the technical engineering track to go up to their principal scientists, which is their top level role, so that women can actually stay in whatever role that they want to, right? So there are challenges. There are challenges entirely up the ladder. And then I think as you start getting higher and higher up, right, especially at the executive level, you might be the only woman in the room. And I mean, you don't really even have to get all the way up to that level to get there, depending on the organization, honestly, but it is more likely. And the more that happens, the more that these like internal voices of things like imposter syndrome and like not having somebody else to talk to can really start playing out. Because when you're like the VP of engineering or the CTO, like there is no other technical person, male or female, at that level for you to talk to in that organization. So in some ways it's like doubly worse, because like you're not just the only woman, you're the only like really technical person at that executive table, and now you're also a woman, and you're like, what is going on here? And so again, this goes back to talking about like networking, getting support, being willing to ask for what you want to. I think a lot of times women, we're taught to be these good little girls, right? And we're taught like you work hard and you will get promoted. And like early in your career, that might happen, right? So then we end up building this belief like, okay, that's how I get promoted. But that's not the case, right? Like I can actually look back over my leadership. So I've led teams for 13 of those 23 years. And I can most likely count on my hands like how many times a woman asked me for a promotion or raise. And I don't remember how many times men have come and asked me for a promotion or raise. And so it's really about realizing that no also just means no right now. And oftentimes a lot of this has to not just do with you, but politics within the organization, like budgets, things like that. And so often we take these things personally, and it's really about stepping back and realizing like, we might have to fight for what we want, but we can advocate for ourselves. We should really be speaking up about our successes. Our managers are not mind readers. They're not sitting behind you, right? Watching what you do all day, every day. So share what you've been working on, right? Be sure to highlight your wins. It is not bragging. And, it is challenging, right? We always have this like assertive aggressive double bind, which is the more assertive we are, the more we're most likely going to be considered that we're being aggressive and that we're less liked. And the nicer we are, the less competent we're seen as women. And so it is challenging. So I also am not going to come here and sugarcoat like, hey, it's going to be a perfect, sunshine and roses everywhere.
Just try hard enough.
Just try. Yeah, that's not it either. But there are things that you can do. There are strategies, right? Like, one of the women I coached, when she came to me, she was like ready to quit her job because like the situation was just like awful, right? And she tells me on a regular basis, she's like, Jossie, I would have quit my job if it wasn't because like I now have somebody who can help support me and help me think through how to have these conversations. And I also walk her off the ledge so often. And I'm like, it is not about you. Like literally them being this way, it is not about you. And it is okay to be frustrated, but also focus on what you can control. There's so much we cannot control. So focus on what you can control and get support, get a mentor, get a sponsor, join communities. Like, you don't have to go through this yourself. I keep repeating that, but it really is like, if there was one thing I would say is, I think often women focus so much on like, what are the skills that we need to build, right? And I'm not saying that skills aren't important, right? Skills are important, but yet I feel like we over index on that. And what really we need, if we focus on some mindset shifts, like, and what are those like crucial little actions to be taking, like, that can be so much more impactful than sitting back and just being like, I'm just going to learn this skill. So.
Exactly. So they already it's like they already have those skills. They just need to say it out loud. They need to share that they have those skills. And also, if like, even if they ask for a promotion or they ask for a raise and someone says no, that's not the end of it. They can ask again. They can try again. I think many women like will try once and they will like they will hear that no and they will be discouraged. So it's okay to feel that, but you need to be back in the game and you need to try again. I want to say that I'm so deeply impressed by your stories and by your insights, and I totally resonate with a lot of those things that you mentioned. A lot of those things are things that I frequently tell women as well, and I meet a lot of women and I see the same problems over and over again. So it really, I totally agree with you. The most important thing is building your community, is getting that network, feeling that you're not alone, advocating for yourself, putting yourself out there. And I totally want to see more women in senior engineering, senior leadership in engineering. That's also like one of the goals for women on stage. So thank you so much for this fascinating discussion, Jossie. It was really great having you, and thank you so much. And I hope we'll be seeing you soon. And to the rest of you, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to visit womenonstage.net and follow us on LinkedIn. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks to everyone who joined in. We'd love to hear your feedback and your thoughts. Join us again at the Backstage Stories of Women on Stage. Visit womenonstage.net and follow us on social media.